Let's go ahead and bring in Steiner Sports CEO, Brandon Steiner.
One of the country's top memorabilia moguls.
I have an unbelievable guest, Brandon Steiner.
Brandon's second to none.
Darren Prince has had highs, lows. He's really seen it all, been around the block. You know him probably for his connection with Magic Johnson, but you know Dennis Rodman. He's been a friend of Steiner Sports. And he wrote the book, Aiming High. Do not buy this book. Buy 3. One for you, one for somebody you know needs the book, and one for a friend. Because this book, to anyone, could be a help. Aiming High is on sale on Amazon. You can pick it up. It's already #1 seller on Amazon.com. Darren, I expect nothing less than a phenomenal book like you did. Welcome, and why did you write this book?
You know, it was the right time, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Always been a big supporter. And
Thank you.
The opiate epidemic in the past couple of years has gotten worse than ever. And I was always looking for a platform to tell my story. And somehow using the talent I've been blessed to represent for so many years. And the timing was perfect. I mean, most people live in shame. There's such a stigma out there to addiction that there's hope and recovery. And I had to tell the message. I had to tell my story that here I am at the top of my game, representing Magic Johnson, Smokin Joe Frazier, Evel Knievel, Pamela Anderson. You saw it all, but I was living a double life. And when I was home alone by myself in my own head, completely broken and suicidal.
Suicidal?
Yep.
What changed?
You know, I had, at one point at the end, I was on an opiate blocker called Suboxone, a mood stabilizer, an antidepressant, anxiety medication, sniffing Ambien sleeping pills before I go to bed and drinking a couple days a week to the point of blackout.
Wow.
I had a spiritual awakening on July 2nd, 2008 that changed my life forever. What I thought was my bottom actually became my beginning.
I remember seeing you in Atlanta in the mid-'90s when you threw the big party and you're with your dad and you know, you're throwing this big party and I'm like, wow, this guy is on the rise. You remember this party? I forget the hotel.
It's in the book.
There was
the Omni.
Everyone there.
Pamela,
it was a who's who party. But something seemed off to me at that party. I said to Jared, I was with Jared at the time, I said, Jared, something's off here. But I couldn't put my finger on it. Because you were rising, but there was just were you high at that party? Were you out of your mind?
It's amazing that you brought this up because I talk about that party. You called me the next day and you said, Prince, that was an amazing party. However, it wasn't organized enough the way a Steiner event would have been. The fact that you had that talent there, I wish you would have called me because for free I would have helped you out. To walk into a room with Pamela Anderson, Joe Montana, Magic Johnson, Joe Frazier,
it was
Baba Bowie, the Howard Stern crew, Dominique Wilkins. 2 hours before the party started, I was sniffing Percocets in my room because I didn't feel worthy of an event like that.
Back to the book for 1 second because, you know, I have friends, I have family that have addictions and it's always troublesome to me. It's draining to me. But when I think about this story, because I think most people viewing you almost wish they had your life, right? I mean, but obviously nothing is always what it seems to be. But who is this book for? Like who's going to benefit the most from this book? Because I think sometimes there's the people going through the addiction, but is this book also for people that are experiencing addiction through other family members and friends so they can understand it better?
100%. It's not just for the addict or the alcoholic or somebody suffering. It's for the family member. It's also great for kids and teenagers because my addiction started as 10, 11, 12 years old. I was verbally teased. I was in special education classrooms. I always thought I was no good. I was in classes with 5 or 6 kids while all my other friends were in classes with 50, and it destroyed my self-confidence, my self-esteem, my ego, my sense of self. I never, ever felt a part of. So when I skipped out of the real world and wound up in this fantasy world with these regal icons, that's still in my spiritual core. I never knew how to push it out. So the drugs made me feel a part of. They made me feel on everybody's level. When the drugs were gone, I went back to being the kid that was 10 years old.
What do you say? What do you suggest to parents, you know, especially now knowing what you know? Are parents more, are they more on top of this now, or are they still kind of in a little bit in the dark? Is it really, because I think when I talked to a lot of the parents, their first thing, I didn't see it coming. I can't believe this was right underneath my roof, and I didn't even realize my own kid was struggling this much. How do you break through that and get and see? what's
I
going
did
on
a
with your kid?
presentation Friday night for some mayors and principals and teachers, and I said, it's 3 words that every parent says, not my kid. And that's complete BS, because my parents thought the exact same thing. There's isolation. The kids can hide this so easily right now, the way that I did. And most are too embarrassed to speak up. It's why I'm continuously going into schools, because when I get that breakthrough with that 15-year-old, and I had it in Long Island 2 weeks ago, put his hand up in front of hundreds and hundreds of classmates and said to me, Darren, what you just said about I'd like to speak to you after, because I've been doing things that I'm not happy with myself. There's such a degree of shame that, it's got to be told.
Talking with Darren Prince, longtime sports agent who really lays everything out on the line, which is hard to find somebody who actually doesn't necessarily tell all the glamorous, but this is the whole story. Aiming high. If you have a question for Darren, we're going to do some Q&A. Any questions? Somebody with addiction, or if you're going through anything you want to ask, we're going to go through it right now. And Lord knows, unfortunately, is addiction at an all-time high? Is it increasing, decreasing in this country?
Excuse me. It's definitely increased, but I was privileged to be at the White House 2 weeks ago, where Trump signed off on a $6 billion bill, which is going to help slowly reduce the opiate epidemic and give aftercare treatment, which is desperately needed, because people think you go to a rehab for 28 days, you're cured. That has nothing to do with it. Getting sober and staying sober are completely 2 different things. Every single day of my life, I'm doing something to give back in recovery. I follow the 12 spiritual steps religiously. I go to 12-step meetings all over the world. I tell people AA means attitude adjustment right now. I want to be a better person. I want to understand why those behavioral patterns have happened and never go near them again, because that's going to lead me back to an opiate.
Scary. How does somebody like you get invited to the White House? How does that happen?
I had a relationship with Trump from Celebrity Apprentice, having Dennis Rodman and Brandy Roderick on there twice. We did some business with his licensing division. I knew him over the years, and I was in touch with Rona Graff, his longtime assistant. She saw me get honored at Turning Point, one of the big rehabs in New Jersey. I spoke in front of 500 people, and she emailed me back and said, I'm going to put you in touch with somebody at the White House that would be a great contact to help you get involved in this mission. And Andrew Giuliani and I met last January. He said they would love to have me assist with getting more of a preventative message out there to these kids.
Is government doing enough not to get on a Trump thing? No, really, let's not get on a Trump thing.
Avoid the political part, because I don't make comments on that.
But is government doing enough? By the way, if you have a question for Darren, just zero in. We're going to start taking your Q&A. Ben's over there waiting for your questions, and we'll zone in on that. And what else should we be doing? Because this opioids thing is really scary shit. Like, it just seems like it's a runaway freight train, and almost difficult to stop. Has government doing enough? Because you see the 60 Minutes piece, you see a lot more written about it in the last year, but is enough being done?
I think it's going in baby steps. Like I said, 2 weeks ago was a huge step, but it's still just not even putting a dent into what's going on. We're losing 182 lives a day in America. The worst epidemic we've ever had, worse than AIDS at its height. So while we're sitting here right now doing this interview, we're going to lose 6 lives from the opiate epidemic. Scary.
Wow. You think people are numb to this, or you think they just don't know what to do?
I think they don't know what to do, and I also think a lot of people are turning a blind eye to it. The reason I wrote this book is to show you can either be from Yale or in jail or Park Avenue and Park Bench. Disease does not discriminate.
Yale, jail, Park Avenue, or Park Bench. I love that. That's fair, and it's true. So it doesn't discriminate. No discrimination. Ben, any question?
What was the moment that you felt that you were able to kind of turn things around?
I brought God into my life on July 2nd, 2008. I'll try to not get emotional, but I was sick and tired of being sick and tired in my apartment in New York City. I had the last of my opiates in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I began to pray. I was shaking, trembling, and crying, and I called out God for the first time in my life, and something came over me. I stood up, I felt a warmth and a presence over my right shoulder, and I actually heard the words, "I got you when you're ready." And I flushed the last of the opiates. I found a 12-step meeting online on the computer about a minute later in my apartment. On the taxi cab ride over, I remember telling myself, holy crap, for the first time in my life, Darren Prince wanted to stay sober a little bit more than I wanted to get high. And in a church basement at 8 o'clock that night, 150 plus addicts and alcoholics that recover from a hopeless state of mind made me feel a part of for the very first time in my life. Not Muhammad Ali, not Magic Johnson, not Joe Frazier, or Evel Knievel. These people showed me the softer, easier way to be accountable, to take an action, to have acceptance, and to learn what beautiful, spiritual, real recovery was about. And that's when my journey began.
So you found this journey on your own. I guess you believe in divine intervention.
Yes, 100%.
Now, has Magic and some of the athletes, have they been supportive, and which ones have had the most profound effect?
It's amazing. The one that really knew how bad it was getting. I mean, Hulk Hogan knew. Magic was the one that had a real heart-to-heart with me. Again, that's in the book. I'm not going to go into it, but it was a phone call in 2006, and being like a brother and a mentor, I told him. I had to tell him what was going on, and it scared the crap out of him. And if you look, you were just on the back cover. If you see the support and the love, I could do a $100 million business deal tomorrow, and I wouldn't get the accolades of something like this. To me, it comes so natural, and I don't do it to get accolades. I do it to help save lives, but it's because there's such a stigma. There's such shame. To me, it's courage and strength to talk about it so we can finally take an action to break through it. The ones that live in the shame are the ones that aren't making it, and they're living miserable lives and slow deaths. And every addict right now, Brandon, is affecting 35 people in their lives. That's what they say. 35. It's
so every
insane.
time somebody's going through something as an addict, you're affecting 35 people.
35 people
siblings,
directly.
family,
And you want to
friends.
strangle the person. You don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
But you have to understand the addiction just owns them. So
I love that. Ric Flair, Mark Cuban. I see. Is that Jason?
Jason Bin.
Wow,
Yeah.
Jason. I love Chris.
He's one of my spiritual big brothers.
Man,
we got
we did
sober.
a pod with Chris, and his story is amazing.
Yeah, we got sober 29 days apart, and one of his friends booked Magic for a keynote back in 2011. This woman Jane, and she introduced us. She knew I had 3 years sober, and he came to Turning Point, and he's my bro. I mean,
What a great speaker, and his whole life was turned. I mean, what an amazing basketball player. And I tell you, his 30 for 30 was the first time. I have a couple family members that are addicts, to say the least. I mean, so
Everybody does.
I've lived through, going into the hotels and going to try to find my brother, going into the streets and not knowing where my brother could possibly be, or him not coming out of his apartment for 6 months, or going into some really shady places. But and as much as I try to understand and felt for my brothers, who are going through this, when I saw Chris's 30 for 30, that's the first time I actually could understand, wow, because I'd never seen anybody put that much transparency into anything. You watch that program, he talks, this is where I slept, this is where I got the draw. He got into graphic details. Because I don't know if people realize to the dark, dingy places you will go when you get into this kind of mindset when
Absolutely.
you're addicted and you're bad.
Yep.
And I thought Chris, that 30 for 30 was a big wake-up call. Not because I didn't have empathy and compassion, but I don't know if I really understood as much as I did after I watched that.
But when you have a family member struggling, typically you're too close to that situation. When you see somebody else, and a guy like Chris put it out there in that Emmy Award-winning documentary, whole different animal.
Yeah, it's amazing. What's the big takeaway from this book? Obviously, the whole book is takeaways. What's the biggest takeaway, especially for someone out there who's maybe not struggling, on the other hand, wants to become more educated and more knowledgeable? What's the best takeaway?
That any of us, whether it's drugs, addiction or not, you can take your bottom and turn it into a beginning. At any stage in your life, you can turn your life around. You can absolutely take your darkest of days and the brightest of lights can come out of it. I started my life at 38. 13, 14 years before that, I had all these celebrities. The book opens with the intro. I've got Ali and Frazier in the same hotel room. The most epic reunion in the history of global sports. I'm high as a kite. You know what, though? 9 years later, I got to go to Joe Frazier's funeral. Got to spend a few days with him in the hospital, 2 days before he passed. Tell him how much I love him. Yeah. Went to Ali's funeral, saw Harlan and everybody. So redemption, when you start doing the right thing, the energy turns right back around.
That's the one sad thing is, even in the bigger picture, is you get to work with the athletes, and a lot of people, they look at that, but these guys, these talents, women, men, they're all human. Yeah. And now a lot of these great athletes that we got an opportunity to work with, some of them are starting to die off.
And they become, and we're blessed to call them friends.
And there's a bunch that have recently passed, and it is tough because you get to know them, and And they're bigger than life, but then you see them, at the end, and you realize,
They're human, just like
human,
us.
just like us, exactly.
Yeah.
Ben?
What do you see are the biggest struggles amongst the high schoolers? You kind of talked about it before, but young kids that are dealing
Is the
with this
biggest
issue.
problem in high school, by the way?
I think it starts in high school. I don't want to use the word blame, but I think the parents are so uneducated that it needs to start more with them. Every high school I go into, when they say, we want you to come back again, I'm like, I'll come back, but I want the parents there. Because it has to start with the parents. Like I said, it's always not my kid. I truly feel, and I told them this at the White House, I spent some time with Kellyanne and Governor Christie a couple weeks ago. If schools started implementing a self-awareness and self-worth program, course, something, 10, 11, 12 years old to these kids, it would single-handedly change the opiate epidemic, addiction, cutting, bullying, all the other struggles that are out there. Because that's where it all comes from. We all have something.
But do you think with it, I know the kids are smoking pot. The vape.
Oh.
I've heard it's escalated to a point where the whole school's high.
I was in one of the schools a few weeks ago. The kids were in the hallway literally with their vapes. It's unbelievable.
We may be at an all-time low right now as far as losing control of our kids because there's so much availability. Kids eating jelly beans, getting stoned.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
gummy bears.
He's eating some gummy bears. What am I supposed to say as a teacher? You can't eat those gummy bears?
Yep.
But we went to dinner with someone who's a step kid who comes from Memphis, and she stays in Scarsdale for a couple of years. We took her out for dinner. And one of the very strict rules in this program, when you come to live with a family in Scarsdale and the kind of community takes care of this kid, you cannot drink, get high, or drive. There's a few other rules, but those are the main ones. So we're talking. I said, when you're the only straight one in the room, you see everything. Because she knows if she gets caught, she's going home.
All right.
And you're missing on the opportunity. And she's like, the whole school's high. And I'm like, really? He goes, well, the vaping and there's all these other edibles and I mean,
it's crazy.
And it's crazy. And I think that it's scaring me to me. And listen, I don't want to, I don't want to get on my pedestal, but I just get scared when I see such easy access and your inability to detect. It's the beginning of...
It's a scary time.
It's a scary time. Surprise you, though, that when you hear things about legalizing marijuana and that kind of thing, or is that it's just par for the course? Either we're going to get a handle on it or not.
I'm not totally against the CBD movement or medical marijuana, because what if somebody like me that's in recovery had real physical ailments, that really had some physical car accidents, bad surgery, that wants to stay sober, but needs to find a way to not have my life become unmanageable again? CBDs and medical marijuana are a perfect solution.
That's true. That's fair. Ben, one more.
Brandon touched on it a little bit before, but for people who maybe don't have an issue but have a family member or a friend, what's the best approach to helping them deal with it?
You got to have tough love, number one. I was with Dr. Drew last week. We did a Q&A, and I called him out because I love that he said this. If it gets to a point where it's that bad, get them arrested. Literally set them up to get arrested, because it'll be the best thing you ever did for them. You'll be saving their lives and saving generations of heartache. And people just, unfortunately, they don't go there. They dance around it. You do an intervention once in a while. You believe the BS. Nope. If you see the warning signs, you got to hit them hard.
It was the beginning, finally, of the beginning for my brother. I had to get him arrested.
Nope.
Which killed me because he called me every day from jail. But
him and our spiritual brothers, I love them.
You know what I love about Adam is I called Adam up and I said, dude, you're in this apartment. And they just called me because my name was on the lease and they wanted to know because they thought it was me.
Yeah.
And they wanted to let my office know they were coming to arrest me. And I'm like, no, that's my brother. And he goes, well, we're coming to arrest him. Yeah. So I called to show you how out of his mind he was, high as a kite. I was like, Adam, they're coming to arrest you. He goes, that's another conspiracy. And about 2 hours later, he's calling me from jail with his one phone call. And it killed me to do that, to let that happen. And I'm like, son, I'm not pulling you out.
Yeah.
Because I figured, jail was going to scare you straight, and also give you an opportunity to get tried out, and it was the beginning of the beginning for him. The beginning of the beginning. One more, Ben. By the way, thanks for your feedback. If you got any feedback on here, also we're going to give away an autographed copy of this book, Aiming High. Just like and share this to somebody who can actually use the insight. By the way, Darren Prince does nothing half-heartedly. It is an all-in process. This book is just chock full of nuggets that if you have people or you're just around people that you know maybe can help, this is going to be a great read for you. So pick this book up. This is a book that I'm sending out to a bunch of people for Christmas.
I can't say I know enough about this, but Darren, maybe you do. This is from Jorge. He's saying that California is trying to pass a bill to make a place where addicts can go get high in private, where they actually provide syringes and other paraphernalia, I guess. Do you agree with that? Is that something that's a thing? Again, I don't know if that.
You heard that?
Me personally, if that's right.
Yeah, I heard about it. I'm not a fan of it. I'm completely supportive of, and again, Dr. Drew and I speak all the time. I mentioned this to him when I was on his show. I don't mind somebody taking Suboxone, which is an opiate blocker, because it does allow you to live somewhat of a normal life without taking the real thing. The problem is you do get addicted to that the same way you do methadone. For me, I swear by a 12-step fellowship. I think that's the way to go. That's a Band-Aid, and it just makes no sense to me that they're considering this. I've read several stories on it. Just you're monitored to see how much dope you can take. So.
What's the hard in your sobriety though, and congratulations on that in this book. But what's the hardest part about taking those 10 years and making it 10 years in one day?
There's a few rules that I really follow as much as I can to stay spiritually centered. If I'm on that spiritual beam brand, then I can get through anything. And we have our challenges in business, the ups and downs, the in-betweens, just like we do in life. But I try to say what I mean what I say, and not say it mean. I try to understand people instead of me being understood. And I'd so much rather feel all right than right. Even if Darren Prince knows he's 100% right, I'm better to keep my peace, because those things keep me away from that relapse thought, which could, God forbid, lead me closer to a relapse.
What's your advice to somebody that can't decide whether they want to get sober or clean, and they're in a dark place?
Read my book. Pick up Aiming High. You'll see what it's like. The back and forth psychoticness and craziness of what you do to either justify or not be accountable for having a problem. You could also go on YouTube. There's so many AA, NA speakers. All you have to do is type in NAA speakers, and you will hear yourself, if you truly believe you have a problem, through somebody else's voice.
And through all this, your business is as good as ever?
As good as ever. It's unbelievable.
What's going on? Give me a couple little nuggets out there for the sports fans.
I mean, it's just our guys, our bigger guys. The hardest thing is getting them.
Magic Johnson, does he sleep? How does this guy? I mean, how does this man? I mean, between basketball, baseball, and there's nobody who doesn't want him to speak. And then, he's still doing HIV, and I see his wife came out with a book recently. Yep. I mean, does he nonstop?
It's nonstop.
My favorite athlete of all time.
We went to, I know,
Johnson,
and he's a big fan of yours and Steiner sports. Guy, always has been. It's amazing. We were on the plane, me and my fiance, with him to Vegas 2 weeks ago for this JBL event that he walked the red carpet for Quincy Jones, and just half the flight. The first half is about how proud he is, and then all of a sudden he just goes into that mode. What's going on with this deal? What's going on with JCPenney? What's going on? But it's just like it's amazing. I still thank him to this day every time. Every time I see him, I go, I can't thank you again. He goes, man, you know me, I'm a machine. Because we got to make that money, because we're going to go get that money. He just, he wants to just do it at a level that nobody's ever seen, and he is. And then we got guys, I love him to death, but, Hulk and I laugh because it's 90% is about life. We got him to do your charity event a few months ago. He didn't want to get on the plane, but he came in, and, Ric Flair's always active. Rodman is always kicking butt.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's got a great message.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Rodman got reborn again with North Korea, good and bad. It jump-started his...
What's crazy about Rodman is how not crazy he can get.
Right.
Like, everybody's got the whole crazy thing with Rodman, but then you can get into some things with Dennis, and I'm like, wait a minute, now you're going to start getting not crazy on me. Because I tell people, I don't know, I've been with Dennis.
Remember after the All-Star, whatever that was, I think it was the All-Star appearances, right, Steve? He did a couple talk shows with them.
When he was on Fox, and he stopped the lady in her tracks. He's like, listen, do you know who this man is? And you know what we're doing here? I'm like, what? He took over the interview on Fox News. I keep the picture of that because it was the three of us on the set, and I had no idea what was going to go on Fox News here. Dennis had his Willis Reed jersey on or Phil Jackson
That's right.
jersey on.
Yep.
I'm like, what is going on here? But even on the pod I did with Dennis, like if you ever listen to a great pod, like I don't know what to expect. We did the phone call. And he's talking about how important it is to be a good parent, and how he struggled and how he's been battling, and how important being a great parent is. I'm like, this is not the direction I thought this call was going. He's always a surprise.
Yep, and we have his 30 for 30 coming out next summer.
Really?
Yep, we just announced it 2 weeks ago. Very excited about that.
Yeah, he's not. That won't be boring.
No.
There's nothing boring about him.
No.
And what's nice about him is also he played on a high level, and he won on a high level.
Nothing you can ever say about his basketball career.
Yeah. Well, congratulations with the book. Real proud of you always to be my friend, and proud of you what you're doing here. I think it's important. We all need to get more educated. I'm trying to get more educated, and having gone through what I've been through, and probably a lot of you listening, you know what I'm talking about. So pick up a few copies of this book on Amazon. Easy purchase. Good Christmas gift. Darren, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, bro.
If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
They can go to the website aiminghighbook.com.